Hello, greetings.
Hi, Peter.
Hello, Glenda.
How lovely to see you.
You too, and welcome guests to another installment of Active Training in the 21st Century, Global Perspective. Again, I'm Peter Zazzali, and I'm delighted to be joined today by my dear friend and colleague, Glenda Linscott.
Hi, Peter. Hello, everyone.
So just a little background on Glenda. She is an exceptionally accomplished actress of stage and screen. She graduated from the National Institute of Dramatic Arts, otherwise known as NIDA. Afterwards, she went and just worked and kept working in the industry. Among other things in her illustrious career, she appeared in a recurring role on the hit series Prisoner, as well as a number of other television programs and films. She is no stranger to the stage, of course. She did a stage version of Prisoner in London and has worked extensively throughout the Australian professional theatre scene, including work at the Sydney Theatre Company, as well as most recently, the Black Swan Theatre in Perth.
Right.
The national, or the State Theatre of Western Australia. And of course, Perth is very important because Glenda in 2015 undertook her current role as head of acting at the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts, otherwise affectionately known as WAPA.
WAPA, yeah.
Glenda, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I think whenever somebody asks me to send my CV and I actually get it up, I go, oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. I've done it's a lot. You forget, because you just as an actor and as a trainer and director, you just turn up every day to do the work. And then you look back and there's suddenly 30 years behind you and you've done a lot.
In turning up and doing the work, you have, of course, been doing that in the capacity of head of acting at WAPA for 6 years now.
5.5, yeah, middle of my 6th year, yeah.
Great. And the current moment is particularly challenging for all of us who are training actors,
Yeah.
all of us in the industry in general. How have you all responded to the virus, COVID-19?
Yeah.
How have you responded to WAPA?
Well, of course, like all of us, it hit us. It was a devastating blow, and when it hit us in Perth, we were just about to go into production week for all our theatre productions. So it was Hamlet, the Cherry Orchard, Mamma Mia, the dance program. Every major production across WAPA was about to go into the theatre and open within 6 days. So it was utterly devastating to walk into those rehearsal rooms and tell the cast and crew that they had to stop. So at the beginning of our COVID journey started with a tremendous shock, and all our students and staff included went into a deep grief, like we all did. And then there was fear about what was going to happen. So there was an enormous free fall for that first 2 or 3 weeks while we were all just going, let's just get a handle on what it is and what actually is the fallout going to be and the impact. So long story short, we decided that we had to learn quickly how to take a conservatoire training program online. And the very first thing we said to everyone was, of course, we're not going to compromise your training. Of course, you cannot do an embodied practice conservatoire training in any performing arts through a computer screen. But what we can do is keep engaging with the practice, keep connected, hold ourselves together through this time, and learn quickly how Zoom became our new best friend, and we were racing off to learn how to do that. And I'm a sort of technological Luddite, and I learned really quickly how to use technology and all these platforms within days. And we worked super hard it took us about 2 or 3 weeks, and we basically brought forward anything that we could deliver on Zoom. So any academic subject or anything like acting for camera, which we could do more effectively on Zoom. All of the voice stuff. The hardest thing to put on Zoom, as as all our colleagues around the world have said, is movement and the embodied acting practice. So, but we have this incredible head of movement, Sam Chester, who devised every single day a new way to keep our students moving. So we did conditioning and yoga and things like that. But she worked with viewpoints through all 3 year levels and got all our students who'd gone off to various states to be with their family in lockdown. And they'd take their iPhones and they'd go out into the world or into the bush and they'd create these little provocations. She would set them every day. And in fact, with the 3rd year, she created a film to honour 𝘱𝘬𝘗𝘬𝘳𝑗, who actually in fact passed away. a few weeks ago. And so it was just stunning to watch how students, because they're so much more savvy than we are, responded quickly to the technology, and Zoom, the lens, actually became like another viewpoint. And so they were working with the frame, with, you know, the space in the frame, even the camera. Like there was one beautiful one where we have a lot of students from lots of different diverse cultural backgrounds, and they used their skin color. They went like this, and they had all these different colors on the screen, and so their own skin was coming through. And it was just, you know, things like that were just so incredibly moving, how you can't put down that creative spirit. And once you accept it and you go, okay, let's show up, let's see what we can do with what we've got, my God, they just start flourishing. So, and in the end, in the last week, we had a little mini Zoom festival. So every year level created something for performance. So the first years did their political speeches and their contemporary scene study. The second years did 3 one-act plays, contemporary one-act plays. So we went, oh goodness, we can't do Life of Galileo, which is what we were going to do with them. That's too hard to do on Zoom. So we split them into 3 groups and gave them a play each and said, you guys drive it. You've got 7 weeks. You figure out how you want to do it. And that wonderful director, 𝘈𝘐𝘵𝘳𝘠 actually worked like a consultant between the 3 of them, and they produced the most exceptional and inventive and wildly inventive stuff. And second year, so it doesn't matter, it didn't need to be perfect. It was just an experience of showing up with how they could work together and be with this material. And they worked with our wonderful accent and dialect coach, 𝘱𝘦𝘳𝘀𝘀, and they all worked with 𝘬𝑚 London. They did the London accent. So they had, pedagogically, they had a really rich time as well. But the third years did an exceptional online production of Alive the Mind by Sam Shepard. And they worked with a director in Sydney. And we had actors across 3 time zones in Australia. And they rehearsed with her for 7 weeks. And they created this Zoom production, which was like this other beast that's evolved. And the work in terms of inhabiting character, dealing deeply with the play, especially in the context of, you know, lots of conversation around what's happening in America at the moment, and that kind of masculine impulse and leadership sort of failure was very interesting for them to actually engage with that. And I was super proud of them. They did an exceptional job. And so what an achievement in just 7 weeks. So that's what we did. And so now we're going to go into second semester, where all of the scene studies and showings like the Shakespeare and the Chekhov project and all the productions are basically going to go back to back for the next 6 months. So it's going to be a hell of a ride.
It has, obviously, but you've all responded to it in such a positive and productive way. How in the rehearsing, whether it's one of Sam's viewpoint provocations or constructing a Zoom production, such as you did with the Sam Shepard, Alive of the Mind, how do you get the actors to interact with each other in ways that still account for listening and responding, remaining truthful in the moment, in concert with an ensemble? How do you get away from the remote divide that inherently comes with working through Zoom?
Look, the first problem was, or challenge I should say, was getting student actors to feel comfortable rehearsing and performing on their own in their bedrooms or in their lounge rooms. Because, you know, it's developing the discipline where you can separate your personal life with your work life. And as we kept saying, look, when you graduate from WAAP or any drama school, this is what your life is going to be. You're going to get a screen test, you're going to get an audition for a play, you're going to develop new work, and you'll be on your own. And in a way, Zoom has given us this incredible gift where we can start. I wish I'd had it when I was a young actor. It would have saved me a fortune in studio rentals, because I could have done all the dramaturgy like this, you know, for the first 2 weeks. And then, you know, so it was getting people to grow the confidence to actually stand up in their private space with maybe their mum next door or their flatmates and do the work. So that was a growing their self-confidence. Once they did that and they started to activate their imaginations and allow themselves to become absorbed in the moment, Zoom, we found, gave actors an opportunity to work at a sort of intimate level, like this conversation we're having now, which was not better, but just different from how it is in the room. We found that it was really difficult to do large cast things. It was much more successful to do scene studies or small cast plays, because if you've got more than 6 faces on the Zoom, it was too difficult. And I think that the third answer to what you've asked is that we just had to accept that it's just not the same as being in the room, and you cannot get that that sort of interpersonal, that quality of that nuance, and that, you know, theatre thrives on that space in between people and that liminal expression between what you're creating together. So that was absent, but it was just being willing to say, this is just for now. This is just this time we're living through. Remember there's a pandemic. Remember that we're keeping people safe. This is about saving lives. This is bigger than all of us. So with a little bit of accepting some of the limitations of the situation, and being willing to show up and have that conversation or that practice with your scene partner via Zoom, I found my students still got a really deep experience out of it.
Yeah, it's inspiring to hear you speak about it. I mean, yes, of course, the results aren't perfect, but in many ways, it seems like the approach of you and your colleagues and students has been pretty close to perfect in engaging it.
Well, yeah. I think that, sorry to jump in, Peter, but that the wonderful thing was that after a while, like you could feel students after about 5 or 6 weeks go, oh, you know, and they started to lean in. It was like, you know, there was shock and resistance and mourning what was. Once everyone accepted that that's gone, and they started to lean in, there was a real kind of sea change in optimism and intrigue and interest and acceptance. Also, there was so much available online, like, you know, theatre companies were putting stuff free online. You know, watching Alec Baldwin came in and did a online reading of another play called Orphans with a theatre, a sort of independent theatre company in Melbourne. So one actor in Sydney, one in Melbourne, and Alec Baldwin in New York. Stunning, you know. And so if these guys can show up and do it, if the cast of Hamilton can do it together for a little girl who didn't get to see her performance, like there was. In Australia, we had the music industry created this 𝘈𝘕 festival, which every weekend from midday, singers would do 20 minutes on Instagram from their living room. So it's like everyone was doing it, and so our actors just got inspired to go, let's make this medium work for us.
And inspiring, indeed, as this is, where do you see the next steps being in terms of actor training? And particularly in Australia and relative to the industry in Australia, in the near term and perhaps even thereafter, when hopefully, for many reasons, we return to some semblance of normalcy on the other side of this pandemic. What does the future look like?
Well, normal is such an interesting word, isn't it? What is normal? I mean, I think it's not just COVID that we're going through, but it's all of it's Black Lives Matter, it's #MeToo. Like there is such an incredible shift in our humanity at this point in time that I don't think we are ever going to go back to how it was. You know, it's going to be different. And I think one of, like, anybody who's been through change, I feel like everything is up in the air, and we've got a gift of a moment to go, do I really want it to go back to like that? Or can I find a more creative way to make it work better for everyone? And that's not just how we deliver training, but it's how do we bring ourselves as human beings to this craft? How do we address those endemic and systemic problems like racism, sexism? How do we deal with the big philosophical debates like treaty and reconciliation and all of that? And I feel like because of Black Lives Matter and COVID, and before that #MeToo, the debate is really speeding up. I don't know if other colleagues feel the same. So I think that the experience of going through COVID has really allowed us the opportunity to deeply question what it is that we are teaching our students to be like. And if we want our students to reach their potential as artists and to be the artists that are going to be our future and be the change that we want to see, how do we actually serve that right now? And I feel really proud of what we've tried to achieve in the last 5 years at WAPA in being nimble, because we're a very, very small team, but we've all come from industry and we're still practicing artists. So we've were able to sort of keep our finger on the pulse, and we can be aware of how quickly the industry is changing. So all sorts of things are shifting, like our first day rehearsal protocols in line with the Australian Actors Equity principles of sexual harassment and equality, and a lot of mental health stuff that's being put in. But it's also now, you know, how do we deal with racism? Because we've got many, many more cultures coming through our school. Every single year since I've been here, there've been more and more and more diversity. It's just so exciting. But, you know, it's asking us to have a deeper conversation about unconscious bias, how we choose plays, how we cast them, what is it that we're actually serving. Of course I want to teach them to act, and of course I want them to be awake and caring human beings, idealistic and political, and empowered to go forward to make the stories that they want to make. So it's about how do I keep that conversation and awareness going so that students understand the framework or the context that I'm trying to place for them, so that they can understand why they're doing Shakespeare and maybe a Chekhov, but they're also going to do a Brandon Jenkins script that's just come out as a Pulitzer Prize winning 2016. Like, it's all, this is what's happening now, and this is where we've come from. And if I can give you a really rich experience over 3 years, you can become the best artist you can be. You go forward and make the change that we want to see.
And with respect to these changes, how much do you and your colleagues follow your students' lead in terms of the current moment and these socio-political, cultural issues? And I say that very deliberately because I learned so much from my own students in this regard, and I had the pleasure and the honor of being able, full disclosure, to work with your students last year. And I found them to be so ahead of the curve of me, and on many, many levels, I have to humbly say so. To what extent should we, as sort of the, you know, the older generation of theater makers and trainers, have an ear to our students in letting them sort of guide us, if not define the current debate on these very issues you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely vital that we listen, that we really listen, and listen deeply to what you know, even what you can't hear. Because even with the best will in the world, sometimes I make terrible mistakes because I haven't understood. But at the same time, I think you need to be, you know, within reason. You need to be really clear and upfront about what your parameters are and why you're making the choices that you are. And as long as students feel that they have agency and that they are heard and that their experiences are valued. I mean, I just read an article coming out of the UK about how students sometimes feel they come from a non-white background and they're in a restoration comedy or they're in a Shakespeare, that they have to somehow play white. And I went, oh, you know, that's just so far away from what I mean or intend. But it just occurred to me that there may be students in my care that might think that that's what we want, and that in order to be successful, that they have to somehow not be who they are. And it's the exact opposite, you know. So I've got to be really careful that I make that clear, that you know, they use this term colorblind casting, but it's like the decisions we make for the students that we've got are determined by where they are in their training and what the next challenge would be, right, to develop their artistry. And part of that conversation is their cultural heritage, and that's a very significant impact on who they are. So, you know, you'd be totally insensitive as a trainer and a director if you didn't engage with that. And like we have, for instance, we are very privileged at WAP because we have the Aboriginal Performance Program, and it's a one-year program. At the end of the year, they audition for all the diploma and the bachelor degree courses. And usually 1 or 2 students come through the bachelor program. But when you have an Aboriginal actor and you ask them to be in, you know, an Oscar Wilde, you have to have a conversation with them about how on earth that's relevant for you, and what it's, you know, what is the technique of learning an Oscar Wilde? How is that of value to you? And where is the common humanity? Like, and I feel like if you can keep having that, engaging with students in that sort of way to acknowledge their humanity, where they're coming from, and the reasons why you're telling their story, And if storytelling is about giving value and meaning to people's lives, then as an actor, you can serve any story as long as it's something that you passionately believe in and that you understand what the play is doing. And I think if you understand that as an actor and you have the skills, then you are really powerful when you go into the industry to become a storyteller.
Yeah, how wonderfully put. So, final thought.
Yeah.
You know, with all these issues in mind, identity, racial identity, gender identity, and so forth, where do you see your program even further developing in terms of addressing these important matters, as we all seem to be having to do, and with good reason, in this current context, socio-politically throughout the world? How to move forward with these very important matters, as you so eloquently described?
I'm ever an optimist, and I'm optimistic because I've lived long enough as a performer to see that the theatre impulse, the impulse for us as humans to tell stories, never dies, never goes away. And theatre will always be in response to the community it comes from. And so I think the way forward for all conservatoire training institutions for the performing arts has to be in response to and connected to the community that it's drawn from. And the voices for, Black Lives Matter, for diversity, for acceptance, equality, for us getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and that our theatre is going to respond to that. So I feel it's incredibly exciting at the moment that we're in a position, and I've learned now, because I've been here 5 years, that drama schools are actually in many ways sometimes ahead of the actual industry, which is incredibly exciting, because if we've got a nimble program that can adapt and change and create classes and modules that will support the students' development. So for instance, we've reduced to, we're doing 2 fewer full-length productions, but we're giving the students an entirely new project called New Voices, which means that they write their own and that goes into full production into a fringe venue space. So that's supporting the development of their voices and celebrating it. And that's just happened. And that's just so exciting, because, I can teach you what I know, but the thing that really matters is when you see the inspiration happen and they take off. And I think that our drama schools and our theatre is going to respond to that. So I feel incredibly hopeful. It never goes away. It just changes.
Indeed. It just changes. Yeah. It's changing under these circumstances so much better, it seems to me, especially for you and your students. Thank you very much for this elegant conversation.
Thank you for asking me, Peter. I'm so happy to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody else who talks to you. And it's such a I feel like pivot's my new favorite word. Is we're talking, you sort of call me the queen of the pivot. Like we pivoted the program, but I think we have got a pivot moment on the planet.
Indeed, we do. As theater makers and artists, in many ways, we are the leaders in shaping the pivot and thereafter. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and God bless to everyone, and be safe. Take care, and we're all in this together, so we'll get through it together.
Indeed, we will. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.
Bye.